Welcome everyone to our second webinar launch of the day. We had a really fantastic number of people earlier this morning, afternoon, evening, depending on wherever you are. So welcome. So to kick off, we'll start with a little bit of an introduction of the GECKO study. I'll be pleased to introduce Mr. Ewan Griffiths.
So yeah, I mean, we all know that cholecystectomy is very common. It's one of the most common general surgical operations done worldwide. And, you know, whilst individual countries have done quite a lot of gallbladder projects, this will be the first global project that will get data from all around the globe, specifically looking at differences between low, middle and high income countries. And we're hoping this will bridge several knowledge gaps in this area. Next slide, Savesh. So the aims are very much to look at this global variation, and the sort of audit standards are all detailed in the protocol, and I don't intend to go through them now. We do have some secondary aims looking at the quality and the safety of cholecystectomy. We're going to look at bile duct injury and its management. We're also going to look at the rates of unsuspected gallbladder cancer, and also look into training and see about there's some extra questions in this cohort study really about green surgery and things that are unique to give a unique flavour to these papers that are coming out. Next slide, Savesh. So the timeline of this study and the methods are very much based on REDCap. We've got a site survey that all sites will have to complete just as the study starts. And if you haven't done this already, this will be emailed to you, and we'll be chasing up some basic demographics of your hospital and what provision it has for scanning and emergency surgery, etc. As I said before, one of the unique parts of this study is the follow-up will be at 30 days, but also we have longer follow-up for selected patients, mainly those that have a bile duct injury or have a cancer. Next slide, Savesh. So we're the first data collection period starts on the 31st of July, and we've got 8 possible 2-week data collection periods. Ideally, to make this study a success, we want as much data as possible. The reason to block them was to make sure that hospitals around the world could participate, because we realize that changeover dates are different and there's different things happening. But ideally, we want as much data as possible, and there's provision to allow extra collaborators for different time periods of collection. The idea is to lock the data set in January 2024, and that will end the timeline for the data collection for the 30-day part, but there will be extra year follow-up for those with gallbladder cancer and bile duct injury. We can talk a bit about that in the next section. We've had a fantastic response. Our team have been advertising via the national leads. We've also done stuff on Twitter and other social media platforms, and we've had 1,775 hospitals who've expressed an interest. And the plan now is to really focus down on those hospitals that are interested and get them to fully register, get all the local ethics and all the requirements for them to submit data to us. And it's going to be a really exciting and massive study, and we can't wait to work with all of you to do that. Next slide, Savesh. So yeah, that's me with the introduction. Sivesh, I'll give it back to you.
So the next talk will be about ethics. A lot of you would have had questions around ethics, and I'm going to introduce Steve Knight, who's a surgical trainee based in Edinburgh. Over to you, Steve.
Hi everyone, and welcome. It's lovely to see you all on the call. I'm on call, but hopefully I won't get another phone call. I've managed to bat the first one away before speaking. So a little bit of a few slides on ethics. So this is certainly very important that we get right at the start of the study. And I know many of you have either sourced this already or are in the process of finalizing this. So when we classify ethics for this type of observational study, it falls into two main categories. The first is research, which is predominantly for most international centres throughout the world, and the second is audits. So in terms of research, now this is based on local, regional or national classifications of the study. You may well require formal ethics approval, either locally or nationally, depending on your local process. Now, certainly this is the responsibility of the local hospital lead, but certainly national leads here can be very helpful in order to guide you whether this needs to be classified and ethical approval be approved in terms of it being classified a research study. And we can also help via email to the general GECKO account if you still have questions about which is most appropriate for you in your centre. In terms of audits, this is predominantly in the UK, and it's classified as an audit because it's collecting routinely collected data, which is otherwise used for patient care. We have national agreements in place, or will have. So what that means is that there's a national approval for this audit to occur within the UK, and that's already been gained in England already and is in the process of being approved in Scotland. Regardless of that national agreement in place, you'll still need to locally register the study in your hospital as an audit or service evaluation. For both, regardless of whether it's research or audits, no data can be entered onto REDCap until ethical approval has been gained. And I'll talk on that in the next few slides about what to do while you wait for ethical approval if the study has started before it comes to you. Next slide, please. So some of you also asked about a DTA or data transfer agreements. So this is currently being finalised with the University of Edinburgh, and we guarantee this will be with you as fast as we can. The reason it's taking some time is it needs to go through the required process and a review by not only the legal team at the University of Edinburgh, but by the clinical team here, in order to make sure that that agreement is accurate and covers exactly what the study is designed to do. Essentially, what the DTA includes is to enter de-identified data onto the REDCap system, how it's going to be secured securely, and also analysed within the University of Edinburgh. Now, certainly what we'll do is please hold on for the moment, but once the DTA is available, we will send it out immediately to all that need it for their approvals nationally and regionally. Next slide, please. Final comment here is if you're awaiting ethics and the study has started at the end of July, that's okay. What we would ask you to do is collect data from each patient consecutively on the CRF or case report form, which can be found at the bottom of this slide as a screenshot, but also in the PDF, which covers all of the GECKO documentation on the website. This will allow you to safely collect data, and please store these forms in a safe place, preferably in a locked cupboard or doctor's office. Once you have ethical approval, you'll be able to then transfer the paper records onto the appropriate REDCap project. That ends any ethical slides, and I'll take any questions now.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that. We don't have any questions at present, but I think one of the questions probably from the earlier session that perhaps has been quite popular is around the DTA. I think some people got confused whether if everyone requires them what are your thoughts on that?
So the DTA tends to be a very specific agreement that needs to be required, particularly for kind of national approval. For example, our Indian colleagues have been very good at getting ethical approval and driving these observational studies previously, and they will need this in order to gain national approval for their centres. It generally isn't needed, but it's certainly available for those who either at a regional or national level need this to gain ethical approval to collect patient data. So it tends to be on a case-by-case basis, but generally the DTA is not required as a routine thing for most people taking part in the study.
Thank you very much, Steve. So we'll move on to our next speaker. And one of the key things on GECKO is that we're going to look at bile duct injury management at quite a lot of detail. So to speak on that, we've got Rich Evans, who's a surgical trainee based at the University of Birmingham. Over to you, Rich.
Thanks, Sivesh. There you go. So I think we all appreciate that bile duct injury is a catastrophic complication, and hopefully and thankfully in most units it's relatively rare. But again, with this huge global project, we'll be able to really interrogate frequency and the complications, and hopefully with our 1-year follow-up, our long-term impact of that. I mean, here's a couple of cholangiograms that we hope we never see, but from the perspective of diagnosis, we're going to be looking at that initially within 30 days, and then of course in over a year when you come back to that. And we'll be looking at that, and the data points really going to focus on whether it was intraoperatively, postoperatively, and the mechanisms for diagnosing that. We're going to be classifying it as per the Strasbourg classification, and that's in your protocols, and something that you can refer to, just so we've got a uniform language that we're all talking. I appreciate some people may define it differently, but it's so we can all sort of understand each other, and then report it appropriately coming back to the literature. I think we all acknowledge that vascular injuries are associated when we've got tricky cholecystectomies and damage to the bile duct, and we'll be asking about that too. That's some key points that we'll be looking at. Infrastructure across our global units varies significantly, and we've got different opportunities to diagnose bile duct injury, and we'll be asking about how you do that in addition to when, how, and what imaging you use. In the UK, we have large and small hospitals. Not everyone will be capable and competent or designed to manage complicated bile duct injury, and we'll be asking about whether you refer that on to different colleagues with different expertise. But equally, we'll be asking you and the teams that have initially started that cholecystectomy to bring back and chase up that data for both 30 days and 1-year follow-up. So we'll be asking key questions about management. This is just an example slide of what the World Society of Emergency Surgery has put forth. And of course, bile duct injury management varies significantly, but that's what we're going to be asking about, whether you use endoscopic techniques, radiological intervention, or surgical options. And when we get down to our surgical points, we'll be asking you more specificities about what you do, the real why, or whether you've needed to do any vascular repair. And again, we are going to be asking what happens in the year following up. I think we can all appreciate that if someone does a HEP-GEG, they're not always straightforward, they're not always complication free. We'll be looking at stricture rates and other infective complications. But we hope to really appraise sort of how people manage and look at bile duct injury across all of our hospitals. So if anyone has any questions, please pop them in the chat. Or Sivesh, have you picked up any that?
Thank you very much, Rich. I think there was, a similar question that was raised during the morning as well. It's around, recognition of CVS, especially in patients undergoing an open operation, and some people saying that's, how do we fill out the data collection form with that? How do you come back with that?
Certainly, people approach things differently from an open and laparoscopic perspective. I suppose You'll have to appraise things on the day, I suppose, and if you haven't specifically looked for a critical view of safety from that perspective, that's something we'll have a word with our colleagues in the committee about how best to stratify that if the open approach is used more often, and we'll look into that for you. Thanks, Ish.
And I think there's another question from Martin about, how strictly are we actually going to look at CVS? Is it a matter of, yes, CVS has been established, or, we've got a list of criteria. How strict are we at implementing that criteria to actually say that we've established CVS?
Well, there's guidance within the protocol, and I mean, theoretically, we're meant to be looking a third of the way up the liver plate, aren't we? So it'll be all specified in your protocol. We'll distribute that to every participant in every centre for clarity.
Thank you very much, Rich. So then we'll move on to the next talk, which is around gallbladder cancer, which is a really key part of our study. And to speak about gallbladder cancers, we have Professor Ewan Harrison, who's one of the co-leads for this study based at University of Edinburgh, and is a professor of surgery and data science in Edinburgh. Over to you, Ewan.
Thank you, Savesh, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's fantastic to see so many people here, and thank you for joining part of this community to do what I hope will be a really exciting and important study in cholecystectomy. One of the areas, as Savesh says, that we're interested in is gallbladder cancer, but specifically it's incidentally diagnosed gallbladder cancer in patients who are not suspected to have cancer prior to surgery. So it's an important problem. It's a difficult group of patients to manage, and we know that there's quite a lot of variability in how this is done internationally. Importantly, we are not looking to collect data on patients who have a pre-operative diagnosis of gallbladder cancer and undergo an operation such as a radical cholecystectomy or a cholecystectomy with liver bed resection or with lymphadenectomy. We do not want to capture those patients, only those that have who have no cancer diagnosis prior to their cholecystectomy. It may be that you are working in a hospital that doesn't routinely do histology on patients having gallbladder surgery for benign indications. So there's a question about that, and it's important to be able to capture where and when that is the case. We're interested in staging, we're interested in the circumstances of the cholecystectomy itself. So we'll be looking at whether bile or stones were spilled at the time of cholecystectomy and the implications on cancer recurrence. We are interested in the immediate management, what imaging is used, are adjuvant treatments like chemotherapy or radiotherapy used, what sort of additional surgery is performed. Are people going back in and taking out some of the liver, doing a lymphadenectomy, doing an extended liver resection potentially? That's what we want to capture. As has been highlighted, for any cancer study, I think, to be meaningful, we need some longer term outcomes. So that's why we're trying to capture for the bile duct injury and the cancer patients alone, outcomes at 1 year. So what's the progression-free survival? Did the cancer come back? What's the overall survival? Is the patient still alive after 1 year? A really exciting part of this project, which is supported by the IHPBA, the International Hepatopancreatic Biliary Association, and the EAHPBA, the European and African Association. So they've been helping greatly with this part of the project. I'm going to just talk about two other things briefly. Omar will discuss later the hospital level survey which is done when you register your mini team. It's really important that this is done accurately, because in it we are capturing important aspects of laparoscopic surgery internationally. As part of a Welcome Leap project, we are looking to try and determine much more clearly worldwide what sort of laparoscopic facilities are available. Is there a stack? Is it being used frequently? What sort of training is available? Is there training? Are there laparoscopic simulation facilities, etc.? And our partners in low and middle income countries, some who will speak in this call, are leading that aspect of this work. One other just quick point about the data sharing agreement. We will, as Steve said, provide this week a terms and conditions which does not need to be signed for the relationship around about the data sharing. We really want to avoid formal data sharing agreements that require alteration on the basis of local legislation and to be signed by institutions. For this type of work at the moment, the international standard is that that is not required, although some hospitals do require it. And it is impractical for us to be able to manage those sorts of contracts across 1,700 different hospitals, across very many data jurisdictions. So we're trying to avoid that if possible, and we will provide terms and conditions, which is a set. It has some legal standing. It's a piece of information, or a document rather, that you can use for ethical applications, etc. Okay, I'll stop there, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks so much, Suvesh, and thank you so much, everybody, for showing such enthusiasm for this project.
Thank you very much, Ewan. So far, there isn't any questions, so I thought I might ask one. There's a lot of questions that have turned up around follow-up of gallbladder cancers, and also it might relate to bile duct injury. So for some people where pathology results or patients who they don't know if might have bile duct injury, what do we do with these patients? Do we then follow them up in institutions where pathology results might not be available to get complete data? I think there was some confusion around that, so I thought I'll ask you that question.
Yeah, thank you. It's an important question, and it's a difficult question as well, as you know, Suvesh. The diagnosis of malignancy, particularly in the Global South, where there may not be consistent pathology services, can be difficult. It can be difficult to differentiate it from TB. There may be cytology alone, without histology. What we're going to be capturing in this study is how the diagnosis of cancer was made, whether it was suspected or confirmed on histology, and what happened to those patients. There will be, I imagine, a group of patients in whom no histology has been performed, but the operating team suspected malignancy. If there's a sufficient number of those, then it would be interesting to examine those separately, but they will be included in a sensitivity analysis. So patients who we have definitive histology for malignancy, and those who we suspect of malignancy, but we're not able to get definitive histology, in order that we're ensuring that we're not excluding hospitals in whom pathological services are difficult to access.
Thank you very much, Ewan. I think there's no questions in the chat box and the Q&A at present. Oh, actually, there's one more question. Are we expected to send all gallbladders for histology?
Yeah, so it's really important that in this study that standard patient care is not changed. So again, as has been said earlier, in the UK, we call that audit or service evaluation, comparing our own practice to international standards. And in that process, we do not want to influence patient care. So if patients have their gallbladders sent for histology as standard, then that is what should happen within this study. If they do not, then that is what should happen within this study. This is an assessment of practice. It's not an interventional study. in which we are trying to determine the efficacy or the effectiveness of a different approach to the management of patients. I'm happy to take further kind of points about that if it's not clear, but I hope that that is clear.
Thank you very much, Ewan. So we'll move on to the next speaker. We have, so one of the key things that we've touched upon briefly is around the 1-year follow-up, and we'll discuss about how best we can do that. So we've got Laura, who's a trainee up in Dublin and also a steering committee member for GECKO. So all the floor is yours, Laura.
Hi everyone, and thanks for coming to today's session. So today I'm going to be just talking about some of the follow-up as part of the GECKO cohort study. So the follow-up is kind of in 2 parts. So we have our 30-day follow-up, which shouldn't be too difficult, which will be performed for all patients, and then we'll then have our 1-year follow-up, which will be performed a year later. So there were some kind of questions coming in regards to the 1-year follow-up about like many centers saying that this isn't like routine for like uncomplicated cholecystectomies. But we've tried to kind of show that what we're going to do is at the 1-year follow-up period, it's going to be important to actually look up the hospital records for each patient that was included. But if there is no data or no notes in their charts from the previous year, then we assume that they had no subsequent admissions or any subsequent complications. So the follow-up, the 1-year follow-up period won't involve any additional patient contact that would be in addition to the routine care. And it would also, one thing it would involve in regards when we're contacting, say, the ethics or audit departments, we would need to keep a record of the patients that were included in each 2-week period on file. That would need to be kept securely in the hospital so that we could then go back to each patient's chart at the 1-year period and assess, were they readmitted in regards to their initial cholecystectomy? Did they have any complications that were found out within that year? So that's something that will need to be organised. I know that some some people involved in the hospital team might be moving from one centre to another. So it is going to be possible for us to, for hospital leads to recruit additional mini team members. And the opening for that will be just before we do our 1-year follow-up. So it will be July of next year. So it is possible for us to recruit additional team members, and we hope that like looking at the 1-year follow-up is something that hasn't really been done before. So we're excited to get the results in regards to that. And I'm happy to take any questions also.
Thank you very much, Laura. I don't think there's any questions at present time, so we'll move on to the next presentation on REDCap by Omar, who's a surgical trainee up in Glasgow.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for attending today. I'm just going to talk about REDCap. So a lot of you may know what REDCap is, but it's a secure server which allows you to enter data on a database fashion. And it's managed by the University of Edinburgh. Once you have expressed interest to sign up for the study, you will be sent out logins. Sorry, Savesh, next slide. Yeah, so it's sent out logins. So each collaborator and hospital lead will have their own unique secure login to help register their team and input data onto REDCap. Now, logins will only be issued once the site survey and the team registration is completed by the hospital lead. And we will start sending out logins next week. The week commencing on the 24th of July for period 1 collaborator. And then every week before the start of the next period, we will be sending the logins for that period. And just as I mentioned before, no data should be uploaded or stored on REDCap until local study registration is completed. And we have created a data dictionary which is present in our protocol, that is a mirror of what is present on the REDCap. So next slide, Savesh. So this is what it looks like. You can access it in our protocol, which is present on the website, which includes data on preoperative, intraoperative, and postoperative fields. So I'm just gonna do a quick demo on REDCap from sort of like step by step to show you how to enter the data for hospital leads. So I'm just gonna share my screen now. So many of you have already done this, registered their team member on your hospital, sorry, on this form, on this survey. So once that you've registered, we will then in the admin, the steering committee, we will check whether your hospital is already signed up, and if that's the case, then we will give you contact with the hospital lead. If not, we will nominate you as a hospital lead. Now, and then within 72 hours, you will receive an email such as this one from surgery.redcap, which will tell you what your username is, such as here, and then allows you with the link to set up your new password, REDCap password. So once you click that, it will take you to set your password, and you just need to type your password and retype it again, and then click submit, and then that will take you to the homepage of the REDCap. When you click my projects, you will see that you have the GECKO Team Registration Project available here. So you click on that, and then you go onto the record status dashboard, and you can see that there is a record here that you would need to access to finalize your mini-team application and to finish the site survey. So in the mini-team application portal, you will enter your hospital just by typing just like that. So let's say we're in Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, and here will ask you about some necessary approvals that you've had in place. So let's say you've applied for the study approval, and that you confirm that you will only enter data on REDCap once your approval is confirmed. That would allow you to enter your hospital lead information. So just like your first name, your last name, and whether you're a surgical trainee or a consultant. Now, if you're a surgical trainee, then this form will pop up, and it's necessary to nominate a supervising consultant for the study. If you're a consultant, then that field will not appear. And then in terms of ORCID is a unique identifier that will allow us to know sort of like who you are when in the authorship, and B is to allow us to pull the data from the ORCID as to get your name as how you want it to appear. So in my ORCID, I want my name to appear as Omar Cooley. So what I do is I just go onto here and put it in here. And if the ORCID is missing or the ORCID is invalid, so if you've put in a wrong ORCID, then logins will not be sent out to that collaborator. And then also please supply a valid email address. And then moving on to the mini-team application, you can click how many periods you want to do. We would hope for you to maximize as many periods as you can, and then how many collaborators you want in each period. Then redo the same thing. The first name, last name, the ORCID, and the email are the main fields. And then finally, you have a field here as for the independent data validator, and that's a person who was not involved in the data collection, and who will be able to validate the data in terms of data accuracy and ascertainment after the 30-day follow-up has finished. So once you've finished all that, you can click Save and Exit Form. A pop-up here will come up because I've not filled anything. And then if you go back to the status record and go to the site survey, this site survey, as Prof. Harrison elucidated, that is really, really important for us to fill it out, because it gives us a sort of an idea on the variation and the availability cholecystectomy related services across the globe. So it covers a bit of an hospital level, cholecystectomy services, diagnostic imaging, and training in cholecystectomy and green surgery. And it's really important to fill it out as accurate as possible. And you can consult your, if you're a surgical trainee, consult your consultant and attending before finalizing it. And once you finish that, you can just go and save an exit form. And then when these two are complete and you're happy with them, we will send out logins for the collaborators 1 week before the start of their period. So the period 1 collaborators will be sent out login next week. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Omar. That was a really good talk on REDCap to help everyone refresh themselves of REDCap. I think one of the key things that we often have issues is around trying to get completeness of, you know, the registration from the expression of interest onto teams registered. If someone is unable to find their logins, what should they do? Or if they haven't received logins?
Yeah, so if you haven't received your login, you should first of all check your junk and spam in folders, because sometimes it goes there. And if still you can't find it, you can email us on geckoredcap@gmail.com, and we will sort that out for you. We can resend your login details.
Okay, thank you, Omar. And I think one of the last questions is around data validation. A lot of people have been asking, what is data validation and who should be a data validator? Just briefly.
So literally anyone who's not been involved in the actual data collection process. So it could be someone new, or like if a supervisor, consultant, or a hospital lead which haven't been involved in the collection of data, they can nominate themselves as the data validator. Now, this is crucial because it allows to see that how many patients actually had cholecystectomy during that period, and how much did we collect, and sort of like that how much data did we miss. And that's really important to sort of like validate this to ensure high quality results.
Thank you. And I think that there's another question about who can be a data validator. I think it can be anyone. It doesn't need to be particularly a consultant surgeon. It can be a trainee.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So I think we'll move on to our national leads panel, who've kindly joined us today. So we've got Antonio Ramos is a national lead from Mexico. Ana Minaya Bravo, national lead from Spain. Janet Martin from Canada, and Jen Mandola from Peru. Welcome, everyone. And thank you for all your hard work in really steering efforts of disseminating GECKO in your centers. Perhaps we can start with Antonio in terms of sharing some of your challenges that you've had nationally in Mexico that might be useful for the audience here today.
Yeah, of course, Shivesh. Well, one of the main challenges that we've had is to get enough support from different societies. And most of the dissemination that we've done of the protocol has been through social media and with the support of some surgical societies, but mostly the interest is from people that are really involved in trying to evolve knowledge. So I think we've done a good job so far. We've managed to include many states around Mexico. Mexico, it's a rather large country. And so far we are up to 67 centers around the country, which is the largest participation that we've ever had in a cohort study with the NIHR Global Surgery Unit. So probably the greatest challenge has been that dissemination. And the second challenge is to make some centers understand about the importance of having the ethics approval for a minimum risk study. Some places still do have some worries about being part of research, and it's something that we've talked to them about, that the importance of advancing knowledge, gathering knowledge in such studies definitely outweighs the risks, and it's something that is good for all of us, and it's a part of understanding better some surgical aspects of global surgery.
Thanks very much, Antonio. And there's a lot of great work that's going on there. And I think one of the things that we can learn from you perhaps is for the audience here today, how do you maintain momentum of all the registered hospitals, not only from the very start in terms of expression of interest, but also converting them to active registrations, to deliver them across all the different periods? How do you do it?
Well, what we've been trying to do is to keep them on groups, trying to be close to them, have a WhatsApp group with all the people that are going to participate within the country, keep telling them about important dates, and that's where we're planning on doing from now on. We're also planning on trying to meet some of them locally, and to have them, get together. There are many hospitals around. We have some big cities in Mexico that do include several hospitals within the same city, like Mexico City and Guadalajara, which are the two biggest metropolitan areas in the country. So those have in excess of 10 hospitals each. So we do think that those centers are of key importance for us.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Anna, perhaps what are some of the things that you face or challenges that you face, and what things have worked for you in Spain to sort of keep things going?
Well, I think the most challenging thing is ethical approval. Most sites in Spain are going to need this approval, and the problem is that now is summer. This is for bureaucracy, red tape, so we have to be patient. But the good thing is that once one hospital gets the approval, all hospital or site in Spain get them. So the problem is to get one, but I hope the process is going to be rapid. Other thing I think it is to have the documentations, the protocols in Spanish, but we have already have translated. And I would like to thank some collaborators that helped with this process in South America and also in Spain, especially to Dr. Aguilar that helped us with some presentation in Spanish to help with this process. Finally, I think that most Spanish collaborators are familiar with all the process of RedCap, collect data in paper. So I think this is going to be in some way easier. But the main concern, I think, it is the 1 year follow, because we need to, I think that leads in hospital needs to create teams to identify what collaborators are going to be good for validation, good to collect data. So this is maybe the main concern for this study. But I am sure that every hospital is going to work at it very well. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. I think those are some really important, especially maintaining momentum for the 1 year follow-up. I think we can we'll move over to Janet Martin from Canada to share some of her experiences in North America and sort of dealing with the processes and regulations for GECKO.
Yes, hi everybody. It's Janet here, and I'm from the Department of Anesthesia, Peri-Op Medicine here at Western University in Canada. I'm going to give a Canadian perspective first. So in Canada, we've been fortunate to be able to participate in the previous GlobalSurg studies. And though we have a set of national regulations which are quite rigorous, and so we're in a situation where we need to probably join and coordinate our efforts in Canada to a greater degree than we've ever done before for the other GlobalSurg studies. And that's because in Canada, we unfortunately do not have a category, or our audit category doesn't apply in this case. So we need REB approval for a prospective study. And we also need institutional approval at each hospital separately. And because we have privacy laws that are quite specific to Canada, which many hospitals in Canada have been requesting individual revisions on the data transfer agreement, or what we call the data sharing agreement, the DSA. And I think as Professor Harrison has alluded to, that's just become untenable now that these global studies have become so large and so collaborative, which is fabulous. It's a good problem to have, but for Canada, it's a very specific problem. So we need to, in Canada, find a new way that complies with our regulations in our country, but that doesn't become too much work for the host institution in Edinburgh. So for Canada, as your Canadian lead, what I'm doing is trying to contact all of you who are interested, and my contact information is on the web app, and join together our contracting offices so that we can find a way. And we're going to have, by the end of this week, it sounds like, the terms and conditions from the University of Edinburgh, to find a way that we can actually do this and contribute to this really important study, because it is so important, but in a way that doesn't require every hospital to require these sign back contracts. So more to come on that. So what we're doing right now is just collecting your interest. Please register your interest. And then we're together, each of us as hospitals, going to try to find the way then to meet the terms and conditions that meet with our local regulations. And again, I'm very hopeful that we can do this. We're going to start, of course, with the larger centers, and especially those that could contribute multiple time inputs or multiple data collection periods, to make sure that all efforts are worthy for everyone involved. So that's just a bit of an update, and it's to be on the positive side. We just need to find a new way for those of us that have national regulations that are more tricky.
Thank you very much, Janet, for that. And I think it's often quite tricky, and I'm sure we'll navigate our way through the DTA. So I think next is Jan Mandiola. So it's a national lead from Peru. What are some of the challenges that you faced that you'd quite like to share with everyone, and maybe some of the hospital leads in your region or in your country here today?
Hello to everyone. I'm Jan Mandiola from Peru, South America. The first challenge that we have is the same as the other countries that are mentioned here, is the ethical approval. Most of committees of ethics in the hospitals are asking for the letter of approval or a document that is from the original country that started the study, that says that they all understand that we are not changing the treatment, or we are not treating patients, we are just collecting data. But most of the committees of ethics feels more comfortable if they have a letter or something from another countries. So most of the hospitals in my country are asking for this kind of letters of support, of letters that says that there's no a deep analysis from the Committee of Ethics, because we are only to collect data. And the second challenge that we have is, besides all the hospitals in my country, most of them have been participants in another study. These times the teams are new. So we have young surgeons, we have new fellows that are going to be part of this study. So they are not familiar with the REDCap registration of this system, that they have to enter to REDCap, have a password and registers their teams. So they think, or sometimes they are afraid that it's going to be a long process, or it's going to take a long time to answer the center server, for example. So we are working in our country, giving them a lot of information, a lot of examples, and show them that is very familiar, that REDCap is very familiar and easy, but some of them are new, so they are kind of afraid to this kind of data collection.
Thank you, Jen. So I think it sounds like there's a lot of education and upskilling going on in your country to really bring together all the hospital leads, and I think it's really, really key. And I think certainly encourage everyone here to sort of, if you recognize any colleagues that you might want to bring along with you in the study, please sort of do bring them along. And we have finally Ada from Turkey, who's joined us here today. Ada, what are some of the challenges that you face, and what has worked in your country to really bring in a lot of hospitals with you so far?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for this valuable multi-center study. We are glad to join this study. From Turkey, we have many centers, just like the GECKO study. The first question is people asking for every period, for every 2 weeks period. Must they change the participants, or the same participants can go on with all the 2 weeks periods? And second, according to me, the biggest problem is the ethical approval. I think one center in Turkey or one center in the world have the ethical approval, then with the help applying for the local approval to the director of the hospital, it will be okay to get the approval. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Ada. Yeah, so I think that there's certainly been a lot of questions around how many periods you can fill in. Certainly you can have different team members in all the different periods, or you can certainly have the same team members in all the periods. I certainly think it really depends, and we're very flexible and inclusive group, and we're very welcoming to whichever structures that works best in delivering the study. And I think in terms of ethical approvals, I think there's certainly been a lot of questions as to when we should be collecting data. Of course, we would only want you to be uploading your data onto REDCap once you have formal approvals in place according to your local policies. And I certainly think there is some flexibility for you or for hospital leads or collaborators to collect the data on paper and only upload them when you have relevant approvals in place. And again, this is something that we don't enforce. It's something flexible that you can choose to pick up on or not. And if you choose to start a later data collection period, you're not any more disadvantaged, or you're no way disadvantaged in that regards. So I think there's been sort of some interesting discussions going on. Does any of the national leads who would like to raise anything in particular from the discussions that we've had today around the structures and processes for the study, or anything around the data collection points that you like to share here today?
May I speak, Sibish?
Yes, Alaza, hi. Welcome.
Hi, Sibish. How are you, everybody? So this is Alazar. Very happy that participating in this GECKO project. So far we have registered like nearly 40 hospitals. It's like almost 20% of hospitals were capable of doing this cholecystectomy. So far we don't have issues with ethical clearance. Unlike other colleagues, things are going well through our national platform that we created through WhatsApp. Maybe two challenges that we think we would have would be regarding the 1-year follow-up. Like in our setup, it's very difficult to catch patients if they change a different hospital. the system are not that electronic. So there is a chance of missing these patients. They may switch from one hospital to another hospitals. So this would be my one challenge, and the other is the routine histopathology, so which we don't do in our setup and maybe in other low developing countries. Maybe these are the two challenges that we think. Otherwise, things are going well with us, and we are very happy so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Al-Azhar. That's very nice to hear about some of the issues that you face around the pathology results, and to really understand whether they're benign or cancer disease. I think certainly one of the key things that we found is that we will certainly have more of these webinars moving forwards, so as to maintain momentum. And before we close, Ewan Harrison, would you like to make any final remarks before we close the meeting here today?
It's very kind of you to offer, Savesh. I mean, just to say that the success and otherwise of these studies is really about good communication. The team are doing an amazing job trying to deal with all the emails that are coming into the inbox. Please let us know what we can help with. If you're not getting an answer, then email again. The first point of call should be the national lead. And then if the national lead can't answer the question, the central team can try to do that. But everybody is doing their best all the time, and everybody is really appreciative of all of the commitment that collaborators across the world are giving to ensure the success of this study. And I would just like to thank everybody on this call for that. Thank you.
And thanks, everyone. So I think we'll draw that to a close, and hope you enjoy good evening or a good day ahead of you, depending on your time zones, and hope speak to you all very soon. Thank you.